So I think it's good we start with Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'een. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. Sirata alladhina anamta alayhim ghayr al-maghdubi alayhim wa lad-dallin. Sadaqallahu al-aliyyu al-azim. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعن الله ولا عدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين آمين يا رب العالمين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم منا جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد منا لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Peace be upon you, O Abu Abdullah, and upon the souls who have gathered in your courtyard. Upon you from us all is the peace of God forever, for as long as we remain and as long as night and day endure. And may God never make this our last pledge to visit you. Peace be upon Hussein, and upon Ali the son of Hussein, and upon the children of Hussein, and upon the companions of Hussein. So last night we ended on a seed, and we set it very carefully in the soil before we closed up for the night. We had walked, all of us, all the way through the supplication that Imam Zain al-Abidin, peace and blessings be upon him, wrote for the guardians of the frontiers, the Dua al-Thughur. And we found at the very end of it a gift so strange and so generous that we had to stop and hold it in our hands. The Imam asked God to give the reward of the frontier guard not only to the one who fought in it, but to the one who supported the one who fought in it, to the one who prayed for him, and then most astonishingly of all, to the one who fully intended to go and hold the line, but was prevented by a sickness or some circumstance, or the closing of every road. The Imam asked God to write such a person among the worshippers, and to place him in the ranks of the martyrs and the righteous. And we drew from that a single sentence, and we pressed it down into the ground much like a seed. Intention is the witness, and the grade is God's to assign. You do not have to fall at the sword to be counted among those who bore witness, but you must be willing. Tonight we open that seed and we watch what grows out of it. Because here is the question it forces upon us the moment that we start taking it seriously. If the witness, the Shaheed, is the one who testifies to God with his life, and we have spent 12 nights proving that this is what the word means, and not the ringing of grief or the celebration of defeat. And if every single believer is summoned to that witness, every soul in this room without exception, then the witness of the battlefield cannot possibly be the only kind of witness. It can't be. It simply can't be. Because almost no one in this room will ever stand upon a battlefield. If that was the only door, that door would be shut off to nearly every one of us, and every one of most people. And ultimately, then such a call would be nothing less than cruelty, and God is not cruel. So there must be more than one road to the station. There must be grades of witnesses and types of witnesses and stations of witness. And our tradition, which thinks about everything, has thought about exactly this and has mapped it out with a precision that will really take your breath away as you begin to comprehend it. So tonight we ask plainly, how many kinds of witness are there? And we will find that answer the most freeing answer in our entire religion. Here it is stated before we begin, so that we can watch it arrive together and gather weight as it comes. You do not have to die to be a witness, but you must be willing to do so. Now, hold on to both halves of this, because this whole night lives in the tension that sits between the two of them. The first half throws the door wide. The witness is not only the one who is killed, the gate is enormous, and everyone is invited through it. The second half keeps the gate from becoming cheap. The witness is not the comfortable spectator who merely admires the martyr from his armchair and risks nothing. Between the wide open gate and the willing heart stands every one of us. And tonight we learn where we're standing. Please give me a salawat and we look at the word that widened.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل.
So I want to begin where honesty demands that we begin, because honesty is the whole method of this series. And tonight, of all nights, it is also the whole of the content. You may have heard a saying from the pulpit. You may have repeated it yourself, and there is no blame if you have done so, or if anyone has done so. It is a beautiful thing to say. And that saying is, the ink of the scholar is heavier on the scales of the day of judgment than the blood of a martyr. It makes the entire room lean forward. And I have to be honest with you about it. The way a teacher who respects you is honest even when it costs him the easy applause. That exact saying, as a transmitted hadith, is one that the scholars of hadith, the people whose whole life discipline is the weighing of the chains and the examining of each of the narrators, have long flagged as being weak. It circulates everywhere, but it is graded as what we call da'if, or weak. And I'm not going to build the most important night of this series on a sentence that I would have to defend with my proverbial fingers crossed behind my back. We don't need the weak to carry the true. And tonight you will see that the true is so overwhelmingly strong that we will never once miss the weak. So let me take this beautiful but shaky sentence out from under your feet and put it down in its place on the ground, such that it doesn't hold any weight that might be placed upon it. The Messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, his family and righteous companions, taught that the Shaheed, the witness, is very far from being the only man only the man who falls in the line of battle. And here is one of those places where the two houses of the Ummah, the Shia and our dear brothers of the Sunnah, stand together and say the very same thing in almost the very same words. Our brethren of the Sunnah preserve the words of the Prophet in their soundest collections, such as al-Bukhari and al-Muslim, and you can find the references in the write-up. And the Prophet has named an entire company of people who fall into this category. The hadith says, the martyrs are 5, one who dies of the plague, one who dies of a disease of the belly, one who drowns, one who is crushed beneath a falling building, and the one who is slain in the way of God. And in other hadith, which have a slightly more fuller telling, narrated from other companions of the Prophet has counted 7, adding to these 5 the one who dies of pleurisy, and the one who dies by fire, and the one, mark this well for the whole of tonight, we'll come to lean upon it, the woman who dies in childbirth. And in our own tradition, we have this same teaching in the words of the Imams of the household. Sheikh al-Saduq writes in his al-Khisal a very long hadith that describes the whole of religion. But the line in it which is important, and it states plainly, and whoever is killed defending his property is a martyr. The reference is, of course, in the write-up. And again, in Al-Kafi, the Imams add the one killed defending his family and his religion and his very life is also a martyr. These are not mere turns of phrase, and they're not just pious exaggerations of preachers. They are, in the exact technical language of the jurists, Shahada, given the rank and the reward of the witness, though not one of them ever stood on a battlefield. We will return to several of them one by one before this night is out. For now, simply let the size of that company land upon you. The plague-stricken, the drowned, the mother in her childbed, the man at his own doorway. The witnesses were always more than the soldiers, and the roll call was always longer than the war. And the tradition hands us a proof that sits at the very center of the house of the Prophet, a proof that should make each and every one of us start reflecting and thinking. It is in Al-Kafi, which is of course one of our foundational collections of hadith, and it's narrated through a chain that Allama Majlisi, the author of Bihar al-Anwar, another one of our great compilations of hadith, has himself grounded and graded as sahih, fully sound. And it comes from Imam Musa al-Kadhim, peace and blessings be upon him, the 7th Imam, where he is speaking of his own grandmother, the mistress of the women of the worlds. The references are of course in the write-up. Imam al-Kazim says, verily, said the Fatima, peace and blessings be upon her, is a truthful one, a martyr. He says, Siddiqatu Shaheeda. Stop and think about that. Shaheeda, a martyr. Say the Fatima al-Zahra, peace and blessings be upon her, who never stood on any battlefield, who died in her own home, of an injury done to her in her own home. And the 7th Imam, with the authority of an Imam, calls her flatly, without apology, without condition, a martyr. Now hold that single word against everything you've ever assumed the word Shaheed could mean. And the great commentators did not let this pass without explaining it. And what they wrote is, I promise you, the whole architecture of tonight handed to us in advance. When the master commentator on al-Kafi, someone by the name of Mullah Muhammad Salih al-Mazandarani, when he reached this narration within al-Kafi, he stopped to explain how the word could possibly reach a woman who died in her bed. And listen to exactly what he says, because it is the key that unlocks this night. The reference, of course, is in the write-up. He says, the martyr is the one slain from among the Muslims on the battlefield of a fighting commanded by the sacred law, by Sharia. Then the term widened and was applied to every one of them killed unjustly, such as Sayyidah Fatima, peace and blessings be upon her. Think about that. Then the term widened. I want you to watch the word with your own eyes through the course of this night. Do this, to widen. It begins exactly where you expect it. The man on the field, the sword in his hand, the enemy in front of him. And then in the very grammar of the tradition, in the pen of the commentators, on the tongues of the imams, it opens. It reaches out past the edge of the battlefield, and it gathers in everyone who was struck down unjustly, everyone who was wronged, until it can hold the daughter of the Prophet struck in her own doorway. The word is not standing still. The word is growing before our very eyes. And the growth of that one word is the entire blueprint of what we will build tonight. We're going to follow the word Shaheed as it widens from the battlefield to the wronged, to the ordinary faithful life. And somewhere in that widening, every single one of us is going to find ourselves standing inside that word. And lest you think that this is the move of only one commentator, hear how Allama Majlisi himself glosses this very same narration. He affirms first that the report establishes her martyrdom beyond all doubt. The references in the write-up, Allama Majlisi says, this report indicates that Sayyidah Fatima, peace and blessings be upon her, was a martyr. And this is among what we call the mutawatira, the matters transmitted so continuously that they are beyond all doubt. A martyr beyond doubt, who died in her own home. And when he turns to the other half of her title, Siddiqa, the truthful one, he shows that it reaches all the way down to infallibility itself. Allama Majlisi continues, this is in Mirat al-Uqul, you can find the references in the write-up. He says, and a Siddiqa is an intensive form, denoting the utmost in truthfulness and in affirmation. That is, she was abundant in affirming what her father, may God's blessings and peace be upon him and his family, brought. She was truthful in all her words, confirming her deeds by her words by her deeds. And this is the very meaning of infallibility, what we call isma. So in one short narration, the seventh Imam has told us that the highest witness station and the highest truthfulness belong to a woman who is never on a field. And the greatest of our scholars have spent their commentaries confirming it. Now, why can the word do this? What gives it the right to widen? And here our tradition's deepest thinker, Allama Tabatabai, may God rest his pure soul, hands us the final piece. In Tafsir al-Mizan, expounding the verse in which God appoints the believing community to be witnesses over mankind, لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ, Allama writes the following. Again, first of all, the verse is of course Surah al-Baqarah, the chapter of the cow, second chapter of the Quran, verse number 143, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, thus we have made you a middle nation, that you may be witnesses to humanity, and that the apostle may be a witness to you. We did not appoint the qibla you were following, but that we may ascertain those who follow the apostle from those who turn back on their heels. It was indeed a hard thing, except for those whom God has guided. And God would not let your prayers go to waste. Indeed, God is most kind and merciful to humanity. Allama explains that the Shahada, the witnessing, is at its root a thing God confers, not only an act you perform, but a station that God places upon you. Allama writes, and again the reference is in the write-up, when speaking about the verse we just quoted, Allama writes the following, know that witnessing over deeds, as his speech exalted as he indicates, is not restricted to the human witnesses. Rather, everything that has any connection to the deed, the angels, the time, the place, the religion, the book, the limbs, the senses, the heart, has a witnessing of it. So do you see what this opens? Witnessing in the language of the Quran has two voices. There is the active witness, the one who stands up and bears testimony, the chooser, the one with the sword or with the pen or anything like this. And then there is the conferred witness, the one over whom and through whom God causes a testimony to be born, the one that God makes a witness, whose very blood, whose very life testifies against the oppressor and for the truth. So the Fatima al-Zahra did not have to lift a sword in order to be a witness in the second voice. Neither, we will find, does a baby at a dry river, nor a child in a ruin in Sham, in Damascus. God made them witnesses. The word widened to gather them in. And tonight is the story of that widening. So now, with the word in our hands and us watching it grow, let us draw the map. Please give me a loud salawat and we move on to the map of the witness.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه.
So if we're going to speak responsibly about the grades of witness, we need the actual vocabulary the tradition uses. And our tradition has two languages for it. One from the philosophers and one from the jurists. We need them both, and we need them in that order, because the first gives us the meaning and the second gives us the precision. So let's first look at the philosopher's map, 5 ways to die. We begin with the philosopher, with Shaheed Mutahhari, may God rest his pure soul, whose framework carried us all the way through the 3rd night of Muharram, and who asked a question so plain it is almost startling. How many kinds of death are there? We covered this in the 3rd session, of course. Because Allama says, merely being killed can have no sanctity. It is not always a matter of pride. Many a death may even be a matter of disgrace. The word Shaheed carries a halo, but the halo does not come from the killing. It comes from something inside the death. So what is that? And he answers by laying out the 5 kinds of death. And of course we studied these, but briefly. There is first the natural death. A man completes his span and goes. It is neither a matter of pride nor of shame. Second, accidental death, the earthquake, the epidemic, the flood. This is considered to be premature and therefore regrettable. Third, the criminal death. And I want you to hold this third one very carefully, because we will need it later tonight, and it will seem for a while to be standing in our way. Shaheed Mutahhari describes it as the killing in which a person kills another in cold blood, simply to satisfy his own passion, or because he considers the victim to be his rival. And of such a death, Allama says, the person killed is regarded as a victim of aggression and tyranny, whose life has been taken in vain. It is shocking and pitiable, but it is neither praiseworthy nor a matter of pride. The victim loses his life unnecessarily because of malice, enmity, and hatred. Mark that phrase, remember it, taken in vain. We will come back to it standing over the body of a child, and we will have to answer it. Fourth, there is self-murder, the worst kind of death, where the death is itself a crime. And then there's the fifth. The fifth is martyrdom, and Shaheed Mutahhari defines it with a precision that we have to carry with us, because everything turns on it. Shaheed Mutahhari writes, and of course all the references in the write-up, and for this particular segment, we've covered this in great detail in the 3rd session. Shaheed Mutahhari writes, martyrdom is the death of a person who, in spite of being fully conscious of the risks involved, willingly faces them for the sake of a sacred cause, or, as the Holy Quran says, in the way of God. It has 2 basic elements. The life is sacrificed for a cause, and the sacrifice is made consciously. 2 elements. The life is given for a cause, it is in the way of God, and the giving is conscious, chosen, eyes wide open, the risks fully weighed. Then Shaheed Mutahhari says a sentence that has tripped 1,000 preachers, the sentence we're going to have to walk straight through tonight. He warns that if Imam al-Hussein, peace and blessings be upon him, were only an innocent man to whom a terrible injustice was done, a pure victim and nothing more, then he could not have been called a martyr, let alone the master of all the martyrs. What lifts Imam Hussein above mere victimhood, what makes him Sayyid al-Shahada, the master of all the witnesses, is precisely that he chose it knowingly. And Shaykh Mutahari is scathing about the preachers who miss this, who, he says, narrate Karbala as though Imam Hussein lost his life in vain, and thereby rob the master of witnesses of everything that makes him the master. He's right. Hold on to that, it is true. And in about 15 or so minutes, it's going to look like a wall built directly across our path when we come to the children who could not choose. We will not knock the wall down. We will find the door in it just as Shaykh Mutahari himself left it open. But first, the jurists. Before we step into their world, let's be clear about what we are doing. Shaykh Mutahari asked, what is inside the death that makes it holy? The jurists are about to ask, what does the sacred law, the Sharia, do with the physical body? They are not going to give you two competing lists. They are looking at exactly the same jewel, but from two different angles. The philosopher gives us the meaning, the jurist gives us the precision. Let us not forget, because some have tried to dismiss him, though they are wrong, that Shaykh Mutahari was not merely a philosopher sitting in an armchair. He was a jurist of the highest order, deeply versed in history, though some have said that he wasn't a historian, and the very man who stripped away centuries of distortion to return us to the true unvarnished face of Kabbalah. He knew the texts and he knew the law. So the first door, the martyr of the battlefield. Because the jurists drew the map even more finely than the philosophers, and the way they drew it is, I promise you, the secret of this night. They asked a very concrete, very physical question about the martyr. A question not about his soul, but about his body. And here it is. Is the body of the martyr washed and shrouded like every other believer who dies or not? And on the answer to that single question, our jurisprudence splits the martyr into two great categories. And the splitting is the sermon. The first category they call a Shaheed al-Haqeeqi, the true master, the true martyr rather. The martyr of the battlefield, Shaheed al-Ma'raka. Open the classical texts of our law, for example, the Lum'a of Shaheed Awwal, the first martyr, himself a man martyred for his scholarship in the 8th century, and read his own words, with the commentary of the second martyr, Shaheed al-Thani, woven around them. He writes, Shaheed Awwal writes, and this is of course the references in the write-up, he says, the third of those exempt from the washing of the dead, the martyr, and he is the one killed in the presence of the Imam, peace and blessings be upon him, or his special deputy on the battlefield of jihad. He is neither washed nor shrouded. Rather, he is buried in his clothes after the removal of his weapons. Reference, like I said, is in the write-up. Hear that ruling because it is quite extraordinary, and our jurisprudence holds it almost alone. The martyr is not washed. He is not shrouded. He is not given the what we call hunut, or embalmed with camphor. He's laid in the earth in the very clothes that he fell in, with his own blood still upon him, because the jurists say his blood is his purity. You do not cleanse a martyr of the one thing on his body that testifies for him. And Shaheed al-Thani, the second martyr, commenting, tells us why the weapons come off but the bloodied garments stay. And his reason is so tender it should stop your heart. The references in the write-up, Shaheed al-Thani writes in his Sharh Lum'a. The rest is left upon him as an honor to him, and so that it may bear witness for him on the day of resurrection. So that it may bear witness for him. Even the blood stain is a witness that will testify on his behalf when the books are opened. And this is the scriptural grounding of the ruling, narrated from Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, peace and blessings be upon him. And the reference again is in the write-up. Imam Sadiq, peace and blessings be upon him, said, the one who is killed in the way of God is buried in his clothes and is not washed. But to this exemption, the jurists fix one strict and exact condition. The condition of what we call ramaq, the lingering spirit of life. The dispensation belongs only to the one whose soul departs on the field itself. If the Muslims reach him while a tiny spark of life is still within him and he is carried off and dies afterwards in a tent or in the camp, he is washed and shrouded like any believer. He keeps the full reward and loses only the ritual exemption. And listen to the Maraji state it plainly. Both Ayatollah al-Haqeeqi, may God rest his pure soul, and Sayyid Sistani, may God protect him, in their Minhaj Salihin say effectively the same thing. The references are in the write-up. The martyr who is killed within the battle itself and whom the Muslims do not reach while there is still a spark of life, what we call ramaq, in him, is not washed, provided the battle was by the command of the infallible Imam, peace and blessings be upon him, or his special deputy, was for the sake of preserving the heartland of Islam. And Imam Khomeini, in his Tahrir al-Wasila, which is one of the most important books of jurisprudence, makes the very condition explicit, the departure of the soul on the battlefield. The references in the write-up, Imam Khomeini writes, Ghusl, or the washing, is waived for the martyr, one who is the one killed in jihad alongside the Imam, peace and blessings be upon him, or his special deputy, on the condition that his soul departs on the battlefield, and attached to him is the one killed in defense of the heartland of Islam. He is neither washed, nor embalmed, nor shrouded, but is buried in his clothes. The line is drawn exactly at the edge of the field and not 1 inch beyond it. And here is where our jurisprudence does something that should make us extremely proud, something that the other schools unfortunately do not do. Having lifted the washing and the shrouding off the battlefield martyr, having honored him so highly that we will not even cleanse his blood, our jurists then insist that the funeral prayer is still prayed over him. The sacred law, the Sharia, dropped the washing. It never dropped the prayer. The reasoning is a piece of pure usul, of legal principle. The general command to pray over every dead Muslim stands by the presumption of its continuity, what we call istishab. Because no text ever lifted it, only the washing was lifted. Therefore, picture it. The community gathers over the battlefield martyr, unwashed and bloodied as he is, and stands and prays. He is so honored that we will not wash the blood from him, and so beloved that we will not let him go into the earth without the entire community standing over him in prayer. The honor is doubled. And this is not the impurity of a thing too defiled to wash. It is exactly the opposite. It is what we call ikram. It is honor. The wounds of the martyr, the tradition says, will rise on the day of resurrection with the color of blood and the scent of musk. And the summit of this entire category, its highest peak, where the air is the thinnest, is the field of Karbala itself. Imam al-Hussein, peace and blessings be upon him, and his companions, were not washed by human hands. They were buried in their garments, in their blood, 3 days upon the open ground. And the rites over the master of the witnesses were the affair of the Imam of the age, his son, Imam Ali ibn al-Hussein, Imam Sajjad, peace and blessings be upon him. And beyond him, in the way the tradition speaks of it, the hand of the awaited one himself, who is known as Thar Allah, the blood of God or the vengeance of God. That is the peak of the mountain. Now hold that peak in your eye and turn with me to the second category, the second door. Because the second is as wide as the open sky, and it is where the whole of tonight and the whole of us actually lives. Please give me a salawat and we move to the second door.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه.
So the jurists call it a Shaheed al-Hukmi or Shaheed al-Akhirah, the martyr of the hereafter, or the martyr by law. And the ruling on this one is this: he is washed, he is shrouded, he is embalmed. He is given every single ordinary funeral rite of every ordinary believer, and he is given the full reward of a martyr, the full reward. And we need to hear this clearly because the human heart loves to rank things. You might quietly wonder, if the battlefield martyr is so honored that we will not even wash his blood from him, and the one who is washed, then the one who is washed and shrouded must be of a lesser rank. No. The washing is not a demotion. It is simply the ordinary dignity of the believer returning to God in purity. And God adds to it in the unseen the rank and the eye cannot see. The washing does not lower the reward or the rank. It just means the glory is hidden in the soul, not written on the skin. And who walks in this category? Open the hadith of al-Bayt and read the roll call they themselves recited. The famous narration, again, references all in the write-up, the famous narration of the Martyrs are 7, which has been preserved in Wasa'il al-Shia and other books within our tradition, the one who dies of the plague. We enumerated these from our brothers of the Sunnah earlier on, now we do it from our books. The one who dies of the plague, the one who dies of the wasting sickness of the belly, the one who drowns, the one crushed beneath the collapsing building, the one killed unjustly, the woman who dies in childbirth, the one killed defending his family and his property, his life and his faith, the one stationed in watch at the frontier, the murabit, the very figure we spent all of last night with, the stranger who dies far from home, and sweetest of all, and a station open to every soul in this room tonight, the one who dies upon the love of the family of Muhammad. Man mata ala hubbi ali Muhammad mata Shaheeda. The one who dies in the love of the family of Muhammad has died a witness, has died a martyr. These are not my categories. They are the family's own. Do not take the role from me, take it from them. The messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, his family and righteous companions, named 7. They are preserved in our books specifically. And the hadith is, of course, in the write-up. And it says, Prophet Muhammad has said, the martyrs are 7, beside the one slain in the way of God. The one who dies of plague is a martyr. The one who drowns is a martyr. The one who dies of pleurisy is a martyr. The one who dies of wasting sickness of the belly is a martyr. The one who dies in a fire is a martyr. The one who dies beneath a collapsing building is a martyr. And the woman who dies in childbirth is a martyr. And the one cut down unjustly, the one killed defending his household, his property, his faith. Imam al-Baqir quotes a hadith from the Messenger of God and names him Shaheed. You can find the hadith in the write-up. And the sweetest of all, and the one station here that stands open to every soul, the Messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, his family and righteous companions, has said, and I just mentioned this earlier, whoever dies upon the love of the family of Muhammad dies a martyr. But here, and the reference I said is in the write-up, but here we must stop and we must be exact, because no word in our religion is more abused than this one, love. When Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, his family and righteous companions, promises the rank of the martyr to the one who dies upon the love of the family, he does not mean someone who has a warm, fuzzy feeling in the chest. He does not mean the man who says, I love Imam Ali with his tongue and contradicts him with every limb. He does not mean love as a mere ticket to paradise, brought once and never paid for again. The love that confers the grade of Shaheed, of witness, is the love the mystics name Ishq. Not an emotion that visits the heart, but a fire that seizes it and remakes it. The lover's love that binds your breath to the breath of the beloved until you walk as he walked, and you stand where he would stand, and you refuse what he would refuse. A love that has not moved your feet is not yet the love that this hadith speaks of. Don't take it from me. God himself makes love a test with one very exacting condition. He does not say, if you love me, feel it. He says, and this is Quran, Surah Al-Imran, the chapter of the family of Imran, 3rd chapter of the Quran, verse number 31, Allah says, say, if you truly love God, then follow me. And God will love you and forgive you your sins. And God is forgiving, merciful. Look at the order. Our love comes first, then the proof, follow me. And only then does the love return. Now from God's own side, God will love you. Love that never becomes following, never completes the circuit. And the family of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon them all, pressed exactly this upon their own followers, lest anyone mistake the claim for the substance. Imam al-Baqir turned to one of his companions named Jabir and said, the references in the write-up, he said, O Jabir, is it enough for the one who lays claim to following us that he should merely say, I love the al-Bayt? By God, none are our true followers except whoever is mindful of God and obeys him. They were never known, O Jabir, except by their humility, their reverence, their trustworthiness, their constant remembrance of God, their fasting, their prayer, and their kindness to their parents. The reference, like I said, is in the write-up. That is the love the hadith is speaking of. Not the mere tongue's claim, but the life's proof. The love that has already made a different person of the one who carries it. And so even this widest and sweetest of all the gates turns out to have a price. It is open to everyone, of course, but it is free to no one. Now look at that list. Look at it hard. There is not one battlefield in the whole of it. There is a sickbed, a flood, a delivery room, a doorway, a frontier post, and a lonely road far from the home, and a heart full of love for the household of the Prophet Muhammad. And every single one of them is a Shaheed, a witness in full regard. And here is the question that completes the map. How did the jurists let the word stretch this far without it snapping in their hands? Because they are careful people. They do not throw the word around. And their answer is a piece of usul so precise that it turns out to be the thesis of tonight, hiding inside a technical term. They say when the hadith calls the drowned man or the woman in childbirth or the unjustly slain a shaheed, this is known as a true elevation, something called tanzil. It's much more complicated than just that word. I'm trying to make it, to simplify it. It's a true elevation, a real conferring by God of the rank and the reward of the martyr. And it's not a change in the law of burial. The reward is genuinely, literally given. The funeral rites simply stay ordinary. And because it is the spine of everything, listen to this carefully, the jurists explicitly refuse to extend the battlefield exemption by what we call qiyas or analogy. They will not reason that, well, the drowned man suffered too, so let's not wash him either. Shia jurisprudence rejects qiyas at its root, or analogy at its root. We discussed this in depth in our Lantern of the Past sessions on Wednesday, specifically when we spoke about Imam Sadiq and in the Mahdawiyya series. I invite everyone to review those write-ups. The references are all in the write-up. The ritual exemption is pinned exactly and only where the texts of al-Bayt place it. The limit of absolute certainty, no wider and no narrower. The categories are held with a jeweler's exactness. So do you see what the jurists have built? In their own dry, careful, technical grammar, tanzil and takhsis and the refusal of qiyas, they have said the exact thing this whole night is straining to say. The station of witness is far, far wider than the battlefield, and the grade is God's to confer and not man's to deduce. The fiqh itself drew the wide gate. It marked the narrow door, the battlefield, and it set Imam al-Hussein at the summit of it. Then it drew a second door, an absolutely enormous one, and it wrote over the arch, effectively, all reward, no battlefield required. And the crowd that streams through that gate, that wide gate, is past counting. And the scholar walks through it, and the wrong child walks through it, and the mother walks through it, and the honest man who only ever wanted to feed his family walks through it. Not one of them died on a battlefield, and yet every one of them is a witness in full regard. Please give me a salawat and we move on to the next point, which is two doors and who walks through.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل.
So the map has two doors, one narrow and drenched in blood and laid out across the open field, and at its summit stands Imam al-Hussein. The other is a wide gate marked the Hereafter, and the throng pouring through it is enormous, and none of them died in a war, and every one of them is a witness entirely. We're now going to stand at that wide gate, and we're going to watch three of them come through it. The one who chose his field, the one who could not choose it at all, and the one who simply lived a good and quiet life. Let's meet them. The first through the gate is the one who chose, and who chose a field that has never had a single sword in it. We sat last night with the hadith of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, peace and blessings be upon him, and we cannot leave it behind because it is the hinge that swings the frontier open into the classroom. The Imam said, and the reference is of course in the write-up, the scholars of our Shia are stationed in watch, murabitun, at the frontier that faces Iblis or Satan and his hordes. They hold them back from breaking out against the weak amongst our Shia, and they prevent Iblis or Satan and his followers from gaining mastery over them. Murabitun, the very word the supplication used last night for the guardian of the borders. Only here the frontier is not a river or a mountain pass. It is the seam where falsehood presses against the minds of the weak. And the guard at the seam is the scholar, the teacher, the one who clarifies, the one who will not let a lie walk unchallenged into a community that has no other defense against it. And Imam Musa al-Kadhim, the seventh Imam, peace and blessings be upon him, sharpened the very same image into stone. He said, the references in the write-up, for the believing scholars, the fuqaha, are the fortresses of Islam, just as the encircling wall is a fortress for the city. The scholar is not merely a teacher, he is a wall, and the one who would breach that wall to get at the people sheltering behind it must first get through him. The desk, the lectern, the pulpit, the seminary, the pen, these are a frontier. And the one who keeps that post, knowing precisely what it can cost him, is a witness who chose his field. Now I must be careful and exact over here because the fiqh we just drew tells us which of these two doors the scholars walk through, and the precision is itself the lesson. They are not battlefield martyrs in the ritual sense. They were not cut down in the line of combat with a sword in their hands. They were shot at a lectern, blown apart at a gathering, executed in a cell. By the letter of the law, their bodies are washed and shrouded exactly like yours and mine. But for the ritual exemption, as Imam Khamenei, may God rest his pure soul, sets it out, belongs to the one killed in the battle itself. We've already discussed this. So by the jurist's own line, you can find the references and the ruling of Imam Khamenei in the write-up. So by the jurist's own line, the scholar struck down at a lectern, away from any field of battle, does not take the ritual exemption. He is washed and shrouded just like any believer. And yet his station as a martyr of the hereafter is entirely held. Listen to this or hear this precisely because the precision is the glory. The scholar martyrs come through the wide gate. They are martyrs of the hereafter in full effect, washed, shrouded, prayed like any other believer. And the assassin's bullet or the assassin's missile was the dhulm that was done to them, and the desk was their field. And that, far from lowering them, sets them at the very center of tonight's argument. They are the living proof that the witness station is one where no army ever marched directly. And our own lifetime, our lifetime, is not a storybook century, has produced a roll of them that we have no right to let slip from our memory. Let us name them, because to leave them as merely scholars who were killed is itself a kind of forgetting. There's Shaheed Mutahari, the philosopher whose framework has carried this entire series, the student of Imam al-Khomeini, the student of Allama Tabatabai, the mind the revolution leaned on, shot dead in the street in Tehran on the 1st of May 1979 by the Furqan terrorist group. A band that could not answer his pen, and so they reached for a pistol. Then there is Ayatollah Muhammad Mufattih, a philosopher, a jurist, the dean of the Faculty of Theology at the University of Tehran, gunned down by that same Furqan group on the 18th of December 1979 on the steps of his own faculty. And mark why they hated him enough to kill him. Shaheed Mufattih had spent his life trying to tear down the wall between the seminary and the university, between the Hawza and the modern campus, to make the scholar and the student speak to one another. They killed him for building that bridge, and so the Islamic Republic named the day of his murder the day of unity between the seminaries and the universities. They made his death day the festival of the very thing he died building. That is what a witness does to the empire that kills him. He turns even the date of his murder into a lesson. Then there is Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Hussein Beheshti, the Chief Justice, Secretary General of the Islamic Republican Party, jurist and philosopher, a man who spoke many languages and built the Constitution, considered the most influential figure after Imam Khomeini in the revolution. On the 28th of June 1981, known as the 7th of Tir in the solar calendar, a bomb planted by an operative who had walked into the building disguised as a sound engineer, tore through the party headquarters, and Ayatollah Beheshti was killed, and with him in a single instant, more than 70 others, cabinet ministers, Minister of Energy, the Minister of Roads, the Minister of Posts, deputy ministers, and nearly 30 members of parliament. Some histories count the figure at 72, 73, 74. But the believers, the nation has remembered them from that day to this as the 72. And no Shia heart anywhere on earth needs that number to be explained to them. 72 in one room, in one blast, and the rhyme with another 72 on another field of slaughter was not lost on a single soul who buried them. They were not a coincidence of arithmetic. They were an inheritance felt in the body. There is Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr, By common acknowledgement, the most brilliant judicial mind and philosophical mind our tradition has produced in perhaps the last 100 years. The author of works that refounded our philosophy and our economics. And beside him, his honorable sister, Sayyidah Amina bint al-Huda, whom the whole Muslim world knew quite well. She herself was a teacher, a novelist, a builder of the faith of generations of women. The American-sponsored Ba'athi regime of Saddam took them out together in Najaf in April of 1980. They were tortured. The histories record the marks of it, and then they were killed. A brother and a sister martyred side by side, defending the same truth. And if that pairing sends your mind running to another brother and sister, to Imam Hussein said Zainab, then you finally understood why we keep insisting that the chain has not broken. It is the same chain. It is the same brother and sister standing in the same place, paying the same price. And then there is Ayatollah Sayyid Hassan Shirazi, struck down in Beirut in May of 1980, shot in a car on his way to the memorial gathering for the martyr Sayyid Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr. He was killed, that is, in the very act of grieving a martyr. The empire could not even allow the mourning. Not one of them died on a battlefield. And of course, we have Imam Khamenei, Imam Sayyid Ali Khamenei, who was with his family when he was struck down, and we only recently attended his funeral. All of them, every single one of them, died at or because of a desk, a pen, a pulpit, a seminary, a faculty, a classroom. May God bless all of their pure souls. May He raise their station and gather them with the witnesses they spent their lives serving. And here's the thing I need you to see about each and every one of them, the thing that makes them the first face of the witness and not a sad footnote. Not one of them was conscripted. No one drafted them into the frontier of the pen. Each one of them chose that post. Each of them knew with wide open eyes, in a country where scholars were being shot in the street, that to keep teaching, to keep clarifying, to keep standing at the seam that faces the deceivers will almost certainly cost exactly what it did finally cost. And each of them got up every morning and chose it again and again and again until the morning it was collected from them. This is the first half of tonight's sentence, standing up in front of you in the flesh. You do not have to die in the field. The desk is a field, but you must be willing. They were willing. The willingness was the witness. But now we have to turn, and it is a hard turn, the hardest of the night, because there is someone standing at the same wide gate who never got to be willing at all, who never got to choose. Please give me a salawat, and we look at the ones who could not choose.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So here's the question that's been waiting since the very first words tonight. The question that sits right now in the chest of every person in this room who has watched a school come apart on the small screen of their phone. A child at her desk in the middle of a lesson. We saw this very recently in Minab. We see it in Gaza all the time. A teacher at the board. The family asleep beneath a shelter. We see the Zionists do this every day in Gaza. They did not choose anything. They did not march towards the cause with their eyes wide open and their risk weighed. They were doing the most ordinary, the most innocent thing a human being can do, learning their letters, teaching a class, sheltering from the sky. And the sky came down on top of them. So what are they? Because Shaheed Mutahari told us, in his own precise words, that the one killed in vain, the victim of another's cruelty, is shocking and pitiable, but neither praiseworthy nor a matter of pride, is that all the bombed child is? A pity? A regrettable number? A life taken in vain? No. And I'm going to give you 3 reasons it is a no. And the first of them lives inside this very house whose grief we are carrying tonight. And his name was Ali al-Asghar. He was 6 months old. We told his story on the 9th night. The infant son of Imam al-Hussein, carried to the lip of the battlefield because there was not a drop of water left in the tents, and an infant cannot be made to understand thirst. He was lifted up not as a shield, but as a plea, and he was answered with an arrow through the throat. 6 months old. Now put him to Shaheed Mutahari's own test. Was that infant fully conscious of the risks involved? Did that baby willingly face them for the sake of a sacred cause? He could not yet hold up his own head. And yet, there is not one Muslim alive who would dare to call Ali al-Asghar anything but a Shaheed, a martyr of Karbala, of the highest rank, the youngest witness of the Master of Witnesses, named in the Ziyarah with his own salutation. So let us be exact about what that proves, because it is the key that turns Shaheed Mutahhari's wall into a door. Shaheed Mutahhari's condition that the witness must choose with open eyes is the bar for the one who is able to choose. It was never and could not be a wall against the one who cannot. It describes the summit of the active witness. It does not deny the station to the infant whom God himself lifts. Remember the two voices of Shahada that Allama Tabatabai opened for us earlier, the active witness who bears the testimony and the conferred witness whom God makes a witness. Shaheed Mutahhari is describing the first voice. The infant is a witness in the second. The grade is God's to assign, and God does not require a baby's consent to make that baby his witness. And so the conclusion is cast iron. If the infant of Karbala is a martyr without choosing, then the infant of Gaza or Minab is a martyr without choosing. And the children of Minab is a martyr or are martyrs without choosing. The house of the Prophet already contains in the body of a 6-month-old child the complete answer to the question the whole world is asking and cannot answer. That is the first reason. And the second, and it is the word itself doing exactly what we watched it do at the start. Recall, if you will, Mullah Mazandarani, Shaheed began on the battlefield and then widened and was applied to everyone killed unjustly, al-Maqtul Zulman, everyone killed unjustly. And we saw when we drew the map that this is not a poet's flourish, it is a named category of the jurists, one of the martyrs of the hereafter in full effect, sitting in the row right beside the woman of childbirth and the frontier guard. So when an aggressor's bomb kills a child who was doing nothing but living, the question of that child's rank is not an open one we have to win by argument. The jurists answered it centuries before the bomb was even invented. Al-Maqtul Zulman Shahida. The unjustly slain is a witness. The child is already written onto the martyr's roll call that the scholars of al-Bayt drew in their own hands. And the Quran seals the whole matter twice. Hear first how God speaks exactly of these people, the weak, the trapped, the ones with no power at all over the decisions that destroy them. If we look at Quran, Surah An-Nisa, the chapter of the women, 4th chapter of the Quran, verse number 75, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "And what is it with you that you do not fight in the way of God, and for the oppressed among the men, the women, and the children, those who cry out, 'Our Lord, bring us out of this town, whose people are oppressors, and appoint for us from yourself a protector, and appoint for us from yourself a helper.'" The men, the women, and the children. God himself names the children. He hears the cry of the trapped and the weak, and he does not file them under regrettable losses or collateral damage. He calls them the very cause the believer is commanded to fight for. These are not lives taken in vain. These are what we call mustad'afun, the oppressed, whose cry has gone up past the sky and reached the very throne of God. And God's own word for what is done to them is dhulm, injustice. And to that he is bound an unbreakable promise. In Quran, Surah Al-Isra, the chapter of the night journey, 17th chapter of the Quran, verse number 33, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "And whoever is killed unjustly, wronged, we have appointed for his heir and authority, but let him not be excessive in killing. Indeed, he is supported." The one slain, madluman, wronged, is not abandoned by heaven. God himself stands as the sultan, the authority behind that spilt blood. So that is the third reason, and it answers the deepest, most stubborn form of the question, the form that asks, but how is it that the bomb child any different from a man stabbed in a dark alley for the money in his coat? Here is the difference, and it's the whole of it. A man in the alley is killed by a private cruelty, for a private greed. That is Shaheed Mutahhari's third category, to the T, exactly. The death that is pitiable but not a glory, the life taken in vain. But the child in the school is not killed by a private cruelty. The child is killed in a collective assault, an aggression aimed at the whole of people because of who they are, because of what they hold. And that places that child, by the very structure of the event, on the side of the wronged, the mustada'afun, the people God commands the believer to defend. It is not the alley, it is the field of Karbala drawn again in a schoolyard. And in the reckoning of heaven, the more innocent the victim and the more monstrous the injustice, the higher the witness rises. For Imam al-Hussein himself is the master of witnesses in part because he was the most wronged. And of all of them, God says the thing that ends the argument forever. In Quran, Surah Al-Imran, the chapter of the family of Imran, third chapter of the Quran, verse number 169. And never reckon those who were killed in the way of God as dead. Rather, they are alive with their Lord provided for. Now I have to bring this down out of the verses and into a room that you've all seen. Because the children we are speaking of are not an abstraction. And to keep them abstract would be a kind of cowardice. The very cowardice the whole night is calling us out of. On the morning of the 28th of February of this year, 2026, the first morning of the war that was launched against the Islamic Republic of Iran, and as it happens, the same dark morning on which we lost our beloved leader, Imam Sayyid Ali Khamenei, may God rest his pure soul, in Tehran, a martyrdom that we will discuss in detail in the next session. On that one morning in the town of Minab in the south of Iran, there was a primary school named Shajara Tayyiba, the good tree. The children inside it were maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. They had that very morning just finished their Quran classes and a missile struck the school. The teachers and the principals did the thing that every instinct God put in a human heart commands you to do. They gathered the surviving children and moved them to the one place that they felt safe, the prayer hall, the room where the foreheads go down to God. And the principal began telephoning the parents to come quickly and take their children home. And when the parents were arriving at the gate, a second missile struck the prayer hall. And the analysts who studied this strike afterwards describe it with a cold technical word that we should all learn and understand because it tells us everything about the intention behind it. It's called a double tap. The tactic of striking a target, waiting for the survivors and the rescuers and the parents to gather, and then striking the same spot again to maximize casualties. When the dust settled, at least 168 children were dead. 168. Listen to the ones who survived, because their words are worth more than all of my discussion. There was a father named Ruhullah, whose little girl had lived through the first strike and was moved to the prayer hall before the second. He said, the references are all in the write-up, by the way. He said, my little girl was completely burnt. We could only identify her from the school bag which she was still holding. And he said, she used to tell me, I promise I will become a doctor so that you won't have to pay medical bills anymore. And I would hold her and say, you are already my little doctor. There was an 11-year-old survivor named Parastesh. And when they asked her what she remembered of the morning, she only said this: before the bomb hit, we had Quran classes. And among the dead was a teacher, Zahra Shahriyari. And Zahra was carrying a child, 6 months along, 6 months, the age of Ali al-Asghar. A teacher who had chosen her post at the frontier of small minds, a mother carrying an unborn child, and a wrong soul struck down for nothing at all. All three of tonight's witnesses gathered into one woman in an instant, and a six-month-old child who never breathed our air folded straight out of the arms of the same house that holds the infant of Karbala. The United Nations did not look away from it, even though they didn't do a great deal. And of course the newspapers did look away from it. A gentleman called Volker Turk, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, addressing the Human Rights Council in April of this year, 2026, said the bombing of that school evoked a visceral horror and named the thing the whole night has been naming, that it shows who pays the highest price for war, civilians with no power in the decisions that led to this conflict. no power in the decisions that destroyed them, al-mustad'afun, the oppressed on the earth. The verse in the mouth of a Swiss diplomat who had never read the Quran. And I will tell you what the power that did this said afterwards, because it matters enormously for what comes next. The power never apologized. Still hasn't. In fact, it went and blamed the victims. When its president was finally pressed, months later, he said, and I'm quoting this individual exactly, "Mistakes are made, a war is nasty, nobody did it on purpose." When its Secretary of Defense, who styles himself as the Secretary of War, was asked, he said, "All I can say is that we are investigating. Of course, we never target civilians directly." And that investigation to this hour, 3 months, 4 months later, has produced exactly nothing. Now hold that sentence. Nobody did that on purpose, because it is not an aberration and it is not new. It is a habit. Reach back and you will find the same hand and the same silence everywhere. In this very war in Gaza, the schools have been struck so systematically that the United Nations has given the destruction its own grim name, scholasticide. The deliberate killing of an entire educational system, some 660 schools hit. And the United Nations Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, in its report published just a month ago in June of 2026, finding the deliberate targeted killing of more than 20,000 Palestinian children. When the Khadija Girls' School in Deir al-Bala in Gaza was struck, the investigators of Human Rights Watch went in and reported in August of 2025 that they found no evidence of any military target there at all, which makes the airstrike, in their finding, unlawfully indiscriminate. Reach back further to the town of Qana in Lebanon in 1996, where the artillery of the occupying regime fell on a United Nations compound packed with families who had fled there precisely because it was supposed to be the safe place. 106 people killed, 52 of them children, and the inquiry of the United Nations found the shelling had been deliberate. Same school, same shelter, same children, the same silence afterwards. Reach back as far as you like. You go back to the hospital in Kunduz run by Doctors Without Borders that an American gunship destroyed in 2015, killing the patients in their beds after the doctors had given the coordinates of their own hospital to the military over and over again, and to what the United States called the hospital afterwards. And here we arrive at the word. Because there is a word at the very heart of all of this, a single, smooth, terrible word. And it is the counterfeit this whole night has been built to expose. When the powers of this age kill a school full of children, they have a word ready for those children. Or 2 words. They call them collateral damage. They called the bombed hospital in Kunduz collateral damage. They called the prayer hall in Minab a mistake nobody made on purpose. And I want to say this to you, with the full weight of everything we have built tonight and across these sessions. In the law of God, there is no such category. There is no laundering word, no accounting column into which you may pour the bodies of children and call the ledger balanced. God's word for the deliberate or reckless killing of one innocent soul is not collateral. It is this. If you go to Quran, Surah Al-Ma'idah, chapter of the table spread, 5th chapter of the Quran, verse number 32, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Whoever kills a single soul, unless it be for a soul or for corruption upon the land, it is as though he has killed the whole of humanity. And whoever gives one life, it is as though he has given life to the whole of humanity." The whole of mankind. That is the weight in the scale of God of one tiny child in a prayer hall. And this disgusting euphemism, collateral damage, is not a small lie or a careless phrase. It is the very machinery of the counterfeit, a system that invents a clean word for its own crime precisely so that it never has to repent of it. It loves the sin. A word built for one purpose only, to let the killing continue, to let the sinning continue, without the conscience ever waking up to it. Allama Tabatabai in Al-Mizan expounded this very verse. He dwells on how it makes the single soul stand for the whole of humanity in the sight of God. that to extinguish one is in the divine reckoning to strike at the sanctity of everyone. Allama writes the references in the write-up. That the killing of one is as the killing of all, and the giving of life to one is as the giving of life to all. This is the meaning that attaches to every killing that occurs within this human species, and is not restricted to some rather than others. The empire built a word to make one child weigh nothing. God revealed a verse to make that one child weigh everything. We will weigh that whole system openly by its proper name and without flinching, God willing, in the next session. Tonight I will only say this much, and I will say it with great care because the care is itself a mercy and a truth. When we cry out against the regimes that do this, and we do cry out, and we will, and we should, and we are commanded to, we are not crying out against a people. The American mother who has buried her son in one of these useless, pointless wars, the ordinary citizen whose children's schools are starved of money while the bombs are shipped abroad in his name, the Jewish child who is raised, the poor soul, to be afraid of his neighbor or even his own shadow, these are not our enemies. They are in their own way also the betrayed, also the devoured by the very systems that claim to act for them. The cry of the believer is against the oppression, the dhulm, and never against the people. The witness against the regime is, at the very same moment, the witness for the people the regime consumes. Hold that very carefully tonight. Tomorrow we will explain it and say it in full and prove it from the mouths of the very men who taught us those slogans. So hear the rank now stated very plainly and let it land exactly where the lie was sitting. The children of Minab, of Gaza, of Qana, of anywhere, they are not the victims taken in vain. They are Shahada, martyrs of the hereafter, witnesses, the wronged whom God has crowned with his own hand, written onto the martyr roll the jurists drew, gathered up by the same hand that gathered the infant at Karbala. Their blood is not a full stop at the end of a sad sentence the world will soon forget. It is a testimony, and God is still reading it out aloud. They could not choose, and the one who has never needed our choosing chose them. And if even the one who could not choose is a witness in full, then surely, there is a place at this wide gate for the one who simply tried to live a good and ordinary and quiet life. And yes, there is. Come and meet the last of the three. Please give me a loud salawat and we move to the witness of an ordinary life.
اللهم صل على محمد
The third one through the gates is the one most of us, God willing, will actually turn out to be. Not the scholar at the frontiers of ideas. Not God protect every child of ours and everyone's children, the little one under the bomb. Just a believer who got up in the dark of the morning, went out to earn an honest living, lived a clean life, came home at night, and who, one ordinary day, did not come home. And I want you to hear with real attention what our tradition says about that person, because I promise you it is more, far more than you've ever imagined. Imam al-Sadiq, peace and blessings be upon him, has said, and of course this is in Al-Kafi, the references are in the write-up, he says, the one who toils for his family is like the warrior, the mujahid, in the way of God. Like the warrior in the way of God. The tired man at the early bus stop, with the hunch of his wife, with the lunch his wife has packed and the weight of the rent on his chest, who will not earn a single coin by anything God forbade. That man, says our Imam, stands in the same rank as the one who carries a sword in the path of God. And this is not just one stray narration that we're leaning on a bit too hard. Imam al-Rida, peace and blessings be upon him, raises it higher still. The reference is in the write-up. Imam al-Rida says, the one who seeks of God's bounty, that which suffices his family, has a greater reward than the warrior in the way of God, the mighty, the majestic. A greater reward. And the same body of narration records Imam al-Sadiq teaching that the man of straitened means, who works only enough to feed himself and his household, asking of nothing unlawful, is like the mujahid in the way of God. The narrations stack one upon the other, all saying the same astonishing thing about a man at his job. Unless you think mujahid is just like a warm, fuzzy comparison, Hear how the messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, his family and righteous companions, seals it. And watch the word Shaheed arrive in his very sentence. The references in the write-up, Prophet Muhammad says, whoever strives for his family by lawful means is like the warrior in the way of God. And whoever seeks the things of this world lawfully in dignity and restraint is in the ranks of the martyrs. Fi darajat al-Shahada is the Arabic. In the ranks of the martyrs. And in another narration that we have in the book, Uyun Akhbar al-Rida, the image becomes almost unbearable in its vividness. The honest earner is compared not merely to the warrior, but to the warrior fallen. The references in the write-up, Imam al-Rida quotes from Rasulullah saying, the one who toils for his family is like the one drenched in his own blood in the way of God. Drenched in his own blood. The very picture of the man fallen in the field of Karbala, laid by the tongue of the Prophet over a weary father walking home from a day's lawful work. So if that man dies on his ordinary road, God forbid, in a crash on the commute, in a sudden sickness of the heart, on the very bus he rides every dawn, the gate does not close on him. And when I say man, I'm including both our sisters and brothers in this. He comes through the wide gate. He is washed and shrouded like any of us, and he is raised, the tradition swears, in the rank of the martyrs and the witnesses. And the same is true of the mother who dies in the bringing of a child into the world, what we call al-Nufasa, named outright in the roll call of the martyrs of the Hereafter. And the same is true of the one killed defending his family or his honest earning, for the Imam has said plainly, the references in the write-up, whoever is killed defending his property is a martyr. There is, I'm telling you, really, a whole hidden congregation of witnesses living quiet lives all around us. And we walk past them in the market and in the streets, on the bus, at the school gate, every single day, with no idea at all of what they are carrying. Now, and this is the question that completes the entire night, so hold your attention here. How is this man a witness? Because his witness is of a wholly different shape than the other two. And the difference between the shapes is the key that unlocks the meaning of all three. The battlefield martyr's death is his testimony. His blood on the field speaks for him. The wronged child's death is her testimony. God raises her spilt blood against the oppressor. But the honest worker's testimony is not his death at all. His testimony is his life. His death only sets a seal upon it. And what did his life testify to? It testified every single morning for 30, 40, 50, 60, whatever number of years, to one quiet, unglamorous, world-shaking thing. I will feed my family by what is lawful, because my God asked it of me. Even on the days when the unlawful was easier and faster, and no living soul would have even known the difference. That is a witness born not in one blazing instance on a far-off field, but across the whole grey length of a lifetime, in tens of thousands of small refusals that no one ever filmed and no one ever applauded. And when at last the death comes, God does not weigh the manner of it. God weighs the intention it interrupted, and the state of obedience the man was standing in when it came for him. And on the strength of that intention, what we call niyyah, and the obedient standing, God credits him in full with the rank of the ones who fell beneath the swords. Do you see now why this is the man or the person that most of us can be or will be, and why it is the best news really of the whole night and perhaps of the whole series? Because it means that the witness was never a thing that happened only once, in one terrible instance, in a distant field. The witness is what your whole life testifies to. And it's being built right now by all of us in this room. In the lawful coin you carried at home, and the forbidden coin you left on the table. In the prayer you don't skip, and the lie you don't tell. In the small thousand things, small, willing, faithful acts of an utterly ordinary life. The seal of the death may come on the battlefield, or in the prison of Sham, or on the morning bus, but the witness was being written long, long before. And this very same principle, that God weighs not the manner of the death, but the service a soul was standing in when death came for it, reaches all the way up from the man on the morning bus to the highest office in the land. On the 19th of May 2024, a helicopter came down in heavy fog over the mountains of East Azerbaijan, and 8 men were killed. The president of Iran, Ayatollah Sayyid Ibrahim Raisi, may God rest his pure soul, and the 7 who flew alongside him. His foreign minister, Dr. Hussein Amir Abdullahian, may God rest his pure soul, the first foreign minister of the Islamic Republic ever to die in office. The Imam of the Friday prayers of Tabriz and the leader's own representative there, Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Ali al-Hashim, may God rest his pure soul. The governor of the province, Malik Rahmati, the commander of the guard, Brigadier Sayyid Mahdi Musawi, and the pilots and flight technicians who carried them, Colonel Sayyid Tahir Mustafavi and Colonel Mohsen Daryanush, and Major Bahruz Ghadimi. They were on their way home from the opening of a dam, from a plain day's work of bringing water and life to ordinary people. Now hear me carefully, because honesty is still the whole of the night. We do not know for certainty, and I will not stand here and pretend to you that we know, whether a hand was behind the crash and the fog. The official investigation found no proof of foul play, and we don't build our claims upon speculation, however much the temper of the time invites it. But here's the thing, and it's the very thing that this entire night has been teaching. It doesn't change their station. The believers did not name them martyrs by how they died. They named them the Martyrs of Service, what we call Shahada khidmat, by what they were doing when they died, which is serving. They fell in the road of their duty to the people of God and the faith of God. The leader of the revolution, may God rest his pure soul, Imam Khamenei, stood himself and prayed over their bodies, and a nation walked behind them in their hundreds of thousands. When the death came by an enemy's hand, whether the death came by an enemy's hand on a mountain or by a mountain's own fog, the answer of heaven is the same, because the grade was never in the manner of the dying. It was in the life of service that the dying only sealed. And do you remember Zahra Shahriyari, the teacher in the prayer hall of the Minab school? Look at her now with everything we've gathered in our hands. She had chosen her post at the frontier of young minds. She was the witness who chose. She was carrying a child. She stood in the rank of the Nufasa, the witness who lived faithfully. And she was struck down, wronged, maqtulan madluma. She was the witness who could not choose. All 3 faces of the witness, the chooser, the wronged, and the faithful life, gathered into one woman in one instance in one prayer hall. The whole of tonight written into a single name. This is not a coincidence we arranged for this sermon. That is what witness looks like when a real human life is finally laid in the scale of God. And it is almost never just one pure kind. It is a life testifying and sealed by death. But before we gather these 3 at the gate, there is a hard word that we are bound to say, because the widest gate is always the easiest to counterfeit. If the honest worker's witness is the lawfulness of his living, then everything hangs on that one word, lawful. And lawful does not merely mean legal. It is not enough that no earthly court would convict you. The wage that carries the rank of the martyr is the wage that is clean in the eyes of God, clean in whose hand it came from, and clean in what it did to other people on its way to your pocket. A salary drawn from the grinding of the poor, a fortune built on a weapon that tears children into pieces, a profit wrung from a hungry people's need, a wage earned in the service of a regime that murders the innocents, the bank that funds the siege, the firm that insures the bulldozer, that levels the family's home, the partner who opens the door so the machine of slaughter can keep supplying parts and permits. These are not the honest living the prophet crowned, though every ledger on earth will try to call them lawful. And do not reach here for the oldest excuse of the complicit. If I don't do it, someone else will. Hear where that sentence has been spoken before. On the night of Ashura, when the tents of the household were thrown open to the looters, the men of the army, as narrated in the Luhuf of Sayyid ibn Tawus records, took precedence over one another in the plunder, racing each other to be the first hand to tear the veil from the shoulder of the daughter of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, and the first to pull the ring from the small one's ear. And each of them, we may be sure, told himself the very same thing, that if his hand did not seize it, the hand at his shoulder would. Someone else would have taken it anyway, did not wash a single one of those hands clean, not in the histories of men and not in the sights of God. It never has and it never will. A sin you commit because another stood ready to commit it in your place is still wholly and entirely your sin, and the wage it pays you is entirely unclean, though it reached you stamped and signed and flawlessly legal. For this was the way of the prophets, and labor was never beneath them. The Messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, and his family earned in the trade and the caravans of Sayyidah Khadija before ever the revelation came, and fed the poor of Mecca from what he earned. The commander of the faithful, Imam Ali, peace and blessings be upon him, with the whole word by his right, worked the earth with his own two hands. And so did Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, peace and blessings be upon her. We have a hadith, the references in the write-up. The commander of the faithful, God's blessings be upon him, would gather firewood and draw water and sweep the floor. And Sayyidah Fatima, God's peace and blessings be upon her, would grind the grain and knead the dough and bake the bread. But see how exact they were about the cleanliness of the gain. Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, peace and blessings be upon him, once gave his servant by the name of Musadif 1,000 dinars to carry in trade to Egypt. On the road, the caravan learned that the goods that they had grown scarce in Egypt, and the traders swore a pact amongst themselves to sell the people of Egypt these products at nothing except double, a dinar of profit on every dinar of cost, squeezing the shortage for all it would give. Musadif, he came home beaming, 2 purses in his hand, the capital and a profit equal to it. The Imam took back only his own purse and pushed the profit away untouched. We have the hadith regarding this. It's called the narration of Musadif, the references in the write-up. Imam as-Sadiq said to him, "Glory be to God. You swear an oath against the people who are Muslims that you will sell to them only at a dinar's profit on every dinar. O Musadif, crossing swords is easier than seeking the lawful." Hear what the Imam refused. Not a theft, not a fraud. By the cold arithmetic of the market, it was perfectly legal trade. But it was a gain drawn from the need of a fellow believer in their hour of scarcity, and that to the Imam was no lawful gain at all, but a thing harder and uglier than war. Crossing swords is easier than seeking that which is lawful. The honest wage is not the easy thing the careless reading imagines. It is one of the steepest disciplines in the whole of the religion, a daily reckoning with where your money is born and whom it bleeds. And the one who profanes this most grievously is the one who is the very one set to guard it, the false scholar, the court scholar. He takes the coin of the regime or the coin of the oligarch, and so his tongue is brought before he ever mounts the pulpit. He cannot forbid the wrong because the wrong signs his check. Some will even prey on the welfare God has set aside for the oppressed, feigning a need they do not have, eating the portion of the orphan and the widow, and then stand over the people and feed them an Islam of the kitchen and the shoes. The corner cases of cleanliness and travel, while the command to enjoin the good and forbid the evil lies forgotten on the shelf. This is the very silence that our beloved Imam al-Hussein, peace and blessings be upon him, indicted from the plain of Minab. We discussed this, of course, in the Ashura sessions. The learned who fell quiet because their comfort had been purchased. It is the whitened sepulchres of which the Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary, may our souls be his ransom, may God hasten his return, warned in the 7 woes that we also discussed during the Ashura sections. Fair without doubt and full of dead men's bones within, and it is the sin God laid upon the ahbar, the scribes and rabbis of the children of Israel, who devoured unlawful wealth and would not forbid the evil before their very eyes. And he whitewashes the whole of it with a gift to the mosque, a public sadaqah, as if a clean donation could launder an unclean gain. It cannot. A gift is only the lid laid neatly over the tomb. And some who climb that pulpit were never formed in the hawza at all. Unlettered men in scholars' garb, misguiding the very people they were trusted to guide. But the ranks of the scholar and how the hawza forms a true one deserves a night of its own, and God willing, it will have one. And understand why we press so hard on this subject, for it is not said in scorn, but in love. We do not want a single one of these men lost. We cannot bear that any servant of God should stand before him on one day with the bread of the orphan in his belly. So we say to every scholar of every rank, the surest guardian of your tongue is a clean and independent income, the very kind we have seen in the hands of the Prophet and the household. For the work of one's own honest hands is no distraction from worship. It is worship. Indeed, it is the highest part of it. There's a hadith from Prophet Muhammad, references in the write-up. Worship is 70 parts, and the best of them is the seeking of the lawful livelihood. Earn your own bread, and no regime owns your tongue. Lean on your own clean labor, and no oligarch can purchase your silence. Close with your own hand every door but the honest one. Bolt shut the stipend that gags you, the gift that compromises you, the welfare you were never owed, until the one road left open beneath your feet is the road of the righteous. And we ask this not to shame them, but to save them. For we would not wish the fire upon any soul that God has made, and least of all upon a man who carries his book in his hand. So the witness of work, exactly like the witness of the tongue, comes with its own conditions. When Imam al-Rida passed through Nishapur, the people of knowledge crowded about his mount and begged him for a single tradition. And he gave them the word of God himself, handed down through his pure fathers. And then as the caravan began to move, he called the condition back to them over his shoulder. This is of course the hadith of the Silsilat al-Dhahab, the golden chain. References in the write-up, Imam al-Rida said, "There is no God but God. That is my fortress," God says. "Whoever enters my fortress is secure from my punishment." And Imam al-Rida then says, "But with its conditions. And I am from its conditions." Even La ilaha illallah, there is no God but God, the very key of the religion, is a fortress entered into bishartiha, by its terms and by its conditions. And the foremost of these conditions, the Imam taught, is wilaya, obedience to the proof of God in one's age. So it is with the wage, and so it is with the work. Yes, the one who goes out to earn an honest living and dies is certainly a martyr. Yes, with its conditions. Bring the conditions and the wide gate is truly and gloriously yours. Please give me a salawat and we move to the final point, which is the greatest God's to give.
اللهم صل على محمد.
So bring the three of them back and stand them side by side here at the wide gate and see what they hold in common. The scholar chose his post and was willing to die at it. The witness, and his witness was his willingness. The child could not choose and was crowned by God anyway, and the child's witness was God's to give. The worker simply lived rightly, year upon quiet year, and his witness was his whole faithful life, sealed at the end by perhaps an ordinary death. Three completely different deaths, three completely different doors, and the same single thing standing over all three of them. A life testified to God, and a grade that was God's to assign and not the chronicles to award. The witness is not measured by how loudly the world records your ending. It is measured by what your living said to your Lord. And now the sentence we began the night with that stands up before you, complete and on its own 2 feet. You do not have to die to be a witness, but you must be willing to. Hear both halves now, with the whole weight of the night behind them. You do not have to die, because the wide gate is real, drawn by the hands of the jurists themselves, and the scholar at his desk, the mother in her childbed, the honest man on his road, all walk through it in full effect. And you must be willing, because the willingness is the part that is yours. It is the one demand the night lays on every single one of us who can choose. God did not ask the infant of Karbala for his willingness. He will not ask the children of Minab for hers or for theirs. For the ones who could not choose, the grade is pure, unowed gift. But for you, for me, for us who can choose, we who got up this morning with options in front of us, we are asked. And the question is not, will you be killed? Will you certainly be killed? Almost none of us will be. Although we pray, inshallah, that we are. The question is the other one, the one you cannot dodge. Are you willing? Is there a line you would actually hold? A truth you would not sell, whatever they offered? A forbidden coin you would leave on the table in the dark where no one is watching, and no one will ever know? Because the supplication taught us last night, and the whole of tonight has proved it, the one who was truly willing with the entire weight of his or her heart and was simply never required to pay, God writes him amongst the martyrs and the righteous all the same. Intention is the witness. The grade is upon God. So be willing, really, all the way down, willing, and then go and hold whatever small, unwatched line is actually handed to you, for nothing in the world but the love of God. There is one last thing I must clear away before we go down into the dark, because a single word, an English word, has tripped up sincere people, and the confusion is far too important to leave standing in the room. We have said from the very first night of this series that a witness is no victim. And someone heard that and thought we were saying that a witness is never wronged. That to honor the children of Gaza as witnesses, we must somehow pretend that they were not crushed or robbed, not the utter and absolute losers of an unbearable injustice. That is not what we are saying, and we must never, ever let it be heard that way. The trouble is entirely in the English word victim, which smears together two things that our religion keeps carefully apart. One of them is mazloom, the one to whom a great wrong is done, the one who suffers injustice. And the witness is almost always a mazloom. Imam al-Hussein, peace and blessings be upon him, is the most wronged and most mazloom man who ever drew breath. The other meaning hidden inside that one English word is defeat, passivity, helplessness, a life reduced to a mere thing that was done to, a death that is a full stop and nothing further. That, and only that, is what a witness is not. The witness is mazloom, but they are never maghloob. They are wronged, but they are never overcome. Struck by the hand of the oppressor, but never reduced to an object, stripped of everything except its meaning. The victim's death, in that hollow second sense, is a full stop. The witness's death is a sentence that God is still speaking. Imam Hussein was the most wronged man on the whole field and its victor. The children of Gaza are wronged, unbearably, unforgivably wronged, and they are not defeated. Their blood is testifying right now, louder than the bombs that fell upon them. Oppressed? Yes, absolutely. Wronged? Yes, before God and before history. Victims in that shallow sense of the beaten and the finished? Never. And that, at last, brings us to a child. Because if the grade is truly God's to give, then God can give it to even one whose name the very chronicles could barely keep hold of. One the historians argued over, one whose age and even whose name the books could not agree upon, and yet whom God kept and whom a whole community has wept for across 1300 years, and over whose small grave a shrine still stands in Damascus to this very hour. The witness is not measured by the loudness of the record. God keeps the witness even where the record forgot the name. And there is no purer proof of it, no smaller and no tenderer proof in all our tradition than the one I'm about to take you down to see. Please give me a salawat and we move on to the dungeon of Sham or Damascus.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
So we spent the whole of this night among grades and categories and verses and the careful things of the jurists, among the two doors and the wide gate and the long roll of the martyrs of the hereafter. And now we must do the thing this series always does at its close, the thing the whole of this theology was only ever for. We must stop explaining the witness and go and stand beside one. And tonight, the witness is the smallest of them all. Not a scholar with a pen, not a soldier with a sword, not even a mother in her childbed. A little girl, 3 or perhaps 4 years old, the books cannot agree, in a cold and roofless ruin in the city of Damascus, who did nothing in all her short life but love her father, and who could not understand, with a child's whole and walled-in grief, why he had not come. I want to prepare you for one thing about how I will tell her story, because it is the very thing we learnt of at the start of this night. The chronicles could barely hold her. We will be honest in a moment about exactly how thinly the record kept her, how late her name came to her, how the earliest histories, busy counting the men and the swords, did not pause over a small girl dying of grief in a ruin. We will not pretend the record is whole. It is not. But here is the whole burden of everything we have built tonight, brought to rest on a single child. The witness is not measured by the loudness of the record. God kept her. The historians may have lost her name, but God kept her soul. And 100 million people who were not yet born when she died, now weep at the mere sound of her name. And she is the smallest proof and the surest of the one thing this night exists to say, that the grade is God's to give, and he gives it even to the ones the world forgot to write down. So let the candle stand. And beside it tonight, let there be the smallest thing we have ever laid upon the grey stone in all of these nights. A child's broken bead, a little bangle, thin enough for a wrist that never finished growing. The smallest object for the smallest witness, a little light put out in the dark. The Imam of our age, may our souls be his ransom, may God hasten his return, who is family to her, who calls her in the most tender words of all this long road, the little one of the house, has been waiting all this night to tell you of her in a voice that you already know, this far into the dark, and inshallah are ready to hear. Come down with me now into the ruin of Damascus. Please give me a salawat and we move to segue to the maqta.
اللهم صل على
So now we have a short supplication. In his name, the Lord of the witnesses and the truthful. So we've stood beside her, the little bead is still on the grey stone and the candle is still burning. Now, before we rise to go out into the night, we turn our faces back to God and we lift our hands. O our beloved Lord, send your choicest blessings upon Muhammad and the family of Muhammad and hasten their relief. O God, we have nowhere to go but to you, and no one to ask but you, and no words except the ones you have placed upon the tongues of your friends. O God, by the truth of the witness whose courtyard we greeted at the opening of this night, our master Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, and by the truth of the souls that alighted in his courtyard, send your peace and your blessings upon Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, the first of the witnesses and the seal of them, and upon Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, the Siddiqah al-Shaheeda, the truthful martyr, the proof that the highest witness was never on a field. O God, we send our peace to the little one of the house, whose night this is, Sayyidah Ruqayyah, the daughter of Imam al-Hussein, peace and blessings be upon her, and to the children of the household, the small witnesses whom the empire did not trouble to count, and to the infant Ali al-Asghar, the witness of 6 months, peace and blessings be upon them all. O God, send your peace upon the witnesses of our own age, who fell at the frontier of the pen and the lectern and the seminary, upon Shaheed Mutahhari and Ayatollah Mufattih, upon Shaheed Beheshti and the 72 who fell with him, and Shaheed al-Sadr and his sister Amina bint al-Huda, and upon Ayatollah Hassan Shirazi. May you bless all of their pure souls and gather them with the witnesses that they served and you, and not let their lamps go out. O God, send your peace upon the Martyrs of Service, Ayatollah Sayyid Ibrahim Raisi, and the 7 who fell alongside him in the fog of the mountain as they returned from a work of service to your people. His Foreign Minister, Dr. Hussein Amir Abdullahian, the Friday Imam of Tabriz, Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Ali Ala Hashem, the Governor, Malik Rahmati, and the guards and crew who flew with them. May you bless all of their pure souls, for they were taken upon the road of their duty. O God, and send your peace upon the smallest witnesses of our days, upon the 168 children of Minab, their teachers, and the unborn child carried into your mercy, upon the children of Gaza and of Lebanon, of Yemen, Iraq, and Syria, and Bahrain, and everywhere else where children are harmed, be they born or unborn children. You named them all in our book, the men, the women, and the children. So do not let us forget the names, and that you remembered. Receive them as you received the infant of Karbala, and be yourself the protector and helper that the killers denied them. O God, preserve for us the one who holds the line in our own time, our master, the guardian of the affair, Imam Sayyid Mujtaba Khamenei. May you protect him and keep him steadfast on the path of witness, and shield him as you shielded the line through every age of fear until the hour of the one that we await. O God, hasten the relief, hasten the return of our master, the awaited one, the Mahdi, the son of Hassan. May our souls be his ransom, and may you hasten his return, and make us, before that hour comes, among those who are willing, who held a line where one was given to them, who fed their families by what you made lawful, who would not sell the truth at any price the world named, and who, when at last you asked, did not look away. And we say of every witness we have named this night, the thing you command us to say, the truest sentence that we know. And do not say of those who are killed in the way of God, they are dead. Rather, they are alive, but you do not perceive it. They are alive, every one of them. The scholar and the child, and the honest worker and the little one of Sham, alive with their Lord fully provided for. And we are the ones who do not yet perceive it. O God, write us with them, and do not make this the last of our covenant. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We are from God, and to him is the return. And we repeat your promise, an eternal promise for the patient, and a warning for the wrongdoers. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. And those who do wrong will come to know to what a bitter end they will return. And we add from the depth of everything that we have learned tonight, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil. God is sufficient for us, and he is the best of guardians. Amen, O Lord, sustainer of the universes. Amen, O most merciful of the merciful. Wa akhiru da'wani alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.